never root ourselves in trend, ever. But that doesn't mean you don't sometimes accept parts of trend and use them in a composition. But it should never be the trend gun. The difference between great composition is the antithesis of that is trend gun. And that's why AI doesn't scare us that much.
Today in the Curious Builder podcast, we had PLAAD in, and we had Mark and Matt in from PLAAD, which is a local architecture company. We spent an hour and a half touring Mesa Hus, and we really wanted to talk about just the real deep thought of storytelling that goes into architecture. And this is going to be a really educational episode, especially for those that really love design and love architecture and want to know why sometimes do architects and designers, it's not a false label, but they care so much about the work. There's a reason behind it. There's a why behind it. There's going to be a lot of education in this one. Without further ado, here's Mark and Matt from PLAAD. Welcome to the Curious Builder podcast. I'm Mark Williams, your host. Today, live from Mesa Hus, I've got Mark Stankey and Matt Byers with PLAAD, an architecture firm here in Minnesota. Longtime listeners, first-time interviewees. Welcome, guys. We finally got it on the books. We're here. We've done it.
Got it done. Yeah, thank you.
I think this episode is going to be really exciting. We just spent an hour, a little hour and a half almost touring Mesa. And to avoid it just being a straight up puff piece, which I'm happy with, but I'm sure the audience is probably annoyed with me talking about Mesa for the last 2 years of their lives. The reason I wanted to bring you in today, and we talked about this a couple of years ago, Mark, was like, well, you're happy to talk about your business and, we'll have everything in the show notes, of course, and we'll talk about your architecture practice and things a little bit like that. But it was more about like the state of the union of architecture. And you had shared something on a client that I think it's hilarious. And I think it's a needed discussion. Julia Miller was actually just in the other day from Yond Interiors, and she was asking specifically about the level of finishes at Mesa Hus. And she basically looked me in the eyes and said, thank you for doing this. Why don't more builders do this as a spec home? And there's a pretty big conversation, and we can go into some of it. But you had said something that's always stuck in my head, and you had kind of laughed about never evers in architectures. Mm-hmm. And I really appreciated there was a time where we had a client that came in, and they had decent taste, but they didn't know what they were referring to, and they wanted to know about the cost. And so they were pointing to different pictures of different things. And you kind of in a very tactful way had said, I consider that one of my never evers. And so one of the things I want to do on this on this podcast is talk about to inform people what they don't understand, because I think people gravitate towards good design and good architecture even if they don't know what they're seeing because they feel different. So anyway, I thought we'd start. That's kind of the intro to the audience, so they kind of know where we're starting from. But yeah. I don't know what you guys think of that intro, but that's kind of where my mind has been at thinking about this interview.
Yeah. Well, I'd say that the never ever is a little bit of a misnomer because there's always a caveat right to it. But I do remember that day, and it was one of those circumstances where we were potentially going to have to part ways with that client because they didn't understand at the moment, and not to their fault or whatever, but they're asking for something that was going to be inauthentic. And I think a lot of the never evers we'll talk about are rooted in something not being authentic in our eyes, at least. And we're probably going to make some people upset by some of these. I mean, it may be controversial, and I hope that isn't taken that way. But I do think it's a necessary conversation, or I think it's certainly a necessary conversation in our office. But as we talk about it, Matt and I will probably use a lot of analogy to speak to it, because it's probably one of the best ways to verbally frame it up, because I think people can see it in other arenas in life, but when it comes to residential architecture and interior design, it's harder to see it and recognize it, I think.
I just listened to a podcast called Founders, and it's a gentleman on the East Coast, and Matt's nodding because I think he's heard it before, but he does basically single people that reads their book and just kind of recaps it. But Johnny Ives is a very famous designer for the iPhone, right? Mm-hmm. And Steve Jobs, when he came back on, I think I was just listening to this a couple of days ago mowing the yard. It was like 140 different lines, and they narrowed it down to like 7. And the whole point was, and now we all know, we all have an iPhone right here now, I think. And it's like, they're beautifully designed. And there is something that we gravitate towards: simplicity, ease of use, and like good design helps not only sell the product, but it really defines what the product is. And as someone, like, I'm a fan of it. I don't feel like I'm very good at it, but I know when I see good design because I just find myself being drawn towards it. Explain a little bit of like maybe either your process or what you see from the eyes of an architect. Because I think one of the reasons why Misahu has been interesting for me as I tour potential clients through, builders, designers, and architects have been the ones that have reacted the most strongly to this house, because I feel like whether it's your training or your mindset, architects in general are better at thinking about storylines than the other groups I mentioned. Do you agree with that? And if so, why do you think architects are better at reading storylines?
I think architects are better at reading storylines. I think, and interior designers and anybody who's interested in crafting space. I think maybe the additional time and education in the process has helped evaluate and understand where value is. And I think we have to make that decision every day where to put value, right? Or where to put effort. Obviously, all this takes resources. And we have been down the road of, all of us, I think, have been down the road of putting resources in places where it doesn't end up in real value. And evaluating something quickly is hard to do from anybody's perspective. But I think from an architect's perspective, we have to think about it on the daily of being able to evaluate, am I going to touch this every day? Am I going to walk by this every day? Am I going to use this every day? As opposed to getting impressed by something that maybe is shallow, and that's a very hurtful word. In some projects where they are going for something very facade based, that is like just the quick wow factor. It's the sugar hit in food, right?
Yeah.
Versus something of substance that will be there for the long haul. And a good example of that, I'm going to use that situation we had where we ran into that never ever thing. And it's, try not to be too mean or whatever, but when in the office, we've noticed this trend where exterior, and I'm going to speak to this in only exterior design, because if we started talking about never evers on interiors, that is a much bigger, much longer list. And it's not always never ever. There's always a caveat. So we have a philosophy, there's no bad materials at all. Never. None. It's bad composition. And, Matt and I say in the office, there's steak tastes great, ice cream tastes great, ice cream on steak tastes like crap. We'll say that.
That's amazing. I love that analogy.
It's about being able to edit and being able to compose. And we also talk about this analogy of the Rubik's Cube in the office. And there's all these different colors when it comes to creating an architecture or design on each side of the cube. And it's our job to keep all those together. And I think what we see is now in some residential circumstances, individuals or teams focusing on just what would be facade level, just bolstering of a project. And a good example of that is having a dormer that goes to nowhere, a window to nowhere. And we've seen this recently as a one-story house, and it's designed with 3 dormers that are just blackened out and that go into a truss opening. Now, historically, if you have windows that go up to an attic and they're useful and they create ventilation, but it's this really strange approach that it's like, if you can't marry an exterior composition to a plan to have windows benefit the inside of your everyday life, and it's just there for facade, it says a lot about not only that piece of architecture, but that individual, right? That's going to be in that house. It's speaking for you. So from our perspective, you see something that's like, hey, we got windows up here and there's all this opulence going on, but really behind the curtain, there's nothing there. And I equate it to the person who wants a Ferrari Testarossa and goes out and buys a Fiero and puts fiberglass on it. And it's like, it's a Testarossa. And that's a Fiero with fiberglass on it. It's missing the point of driving a Ferrari and have a gated shifter and feeling the click and hearing a 12-cylinder engine rev and feeling road handling to that level and that smell of leather. The different things. One is a projection of opulence that isn't really there. And the other is something that would have humility, that would say, I'm going to design a really wonderful one-level home that doesn't engage these dormers, but still be able to have the talent to do it in a way that it's all cohesive and the composition is intact and beautiful, but it maybe isn't so forefront, like outwardly bragging. But you go inside and there's richness and there's value and there's things that they're putting resources in things that you're going to touch every day and are going to be more of substance over the long haul. And so that is one example of a never ever, and why it's a never ever.
I think it's a great analogy. I like what you said, that there's no bad material, just bad composition. I think that's really important. I like watches, and you can get a Timex watch for a couple $100. You can get a Patek Philippe for a couple $100,000. And so it's like they both tell time. And so it depends on what your use is. But I think there's something about a story. And I still think, by the way, speaking of Patek Philippe, I think they have one of the best sales slogans ever. I don't know if you've ever seen them in a magazine, where it says, you never own one, you simply keep it for the next generation. Like, dang, that is a good way to spend a lot of money on it. But anyway, going back to the value of time, I wonder if it doesn't happen as you get older. It's not that you appreciate finer things. I think you pay more attention to the details because you're comfortable with who you are. And I think your confidence level as you get older, you become more at peace with who you are as a person, as a family. And, we're young dads that have families, and when the kids are little, there's certain things I remember. This is weird. I guess we're going there. I also like nice clothes. And so it's like, but I remember the first 8 years, I was like, I would come home from work, I would change into a cotton t-shirt because I know I was going to get throw up on it. And it's like that oil in the milk throw up or whatever is like, you cannot get it out. I know Matt's just dying. This is what we talk about in the Curious Builder podcast, real stuff. But it's very applicable. This is crazy. I'm ruining it, but it's I wanted it, but that's real life. At composition wise, if I am burping a baby, I'm not going to wear my nicest suit of clothes, if you will. Mm-hmm. And going back to the home, which is interesting about a home, is everyone has a story to tell about their own home. And this is a quick testament to a client of mine. They did very well. It was the first $1 million home I ever built, which is funny now because now I can't even build under that just with the cost. But at the time, I'll never forget, and I'll always tell the story because it had such heart to it. And they came out of a very simple Rutland or Ryland home, and they had done well, and they wanted to build a nice home for their family. And we're sitting in her great room, and she starts crying. And she said, "Mark, my friends don't have the same resources that I have, and I feel like they won't be welcome in my home." And I don't want to say her name. And I said, "Sarah." Melania, no, definitely not. I said, "Sarah," "the fact that you're reacting this way, anyone that comes to your home is going to feel welcome because you make people feel welcome." But the spirit of her love and the care for other people, that filled her house with love. And this is kind of a clumsy way to go back to this full story about what people prioritize. But I think you're right. I think when people are educated about what a home it does represent a lot of their values. Anyway, that's kind of when I hear this story about if you put on, right? It's fake. It's not real. And I think in architecture, my dad built a lot in the 70s and 80s. They're very practical homes. How quick can you make them? How cheap can you make them? Because, you look at the 40s and 50s and the world, World War II, boom, they just needed housing, right? Yeah. And if we lose fact that we're still creating homes for people to live in, there is a necessity there too. But he said, now he calls them gable homes. He goes, everywhere I see, all I see is gable homes. I got gables on gables on gables. He's like, what are we doing? And he wasn't even big into architecture. Even he can say wow, this is kind of crazy what the homes have become.
Well, Mark said, you made a great point a few months ago. You said, the invention of the plated truss.
Oh, I love this.
Right? Ruined authenticity. And I think this was going back to is authenticity, I think, is really important. I look at, as a teenager, you're young and rambunctious and you do want to, you want to be flashy, maybe, but as you grow older, you get more comfortable with yourself and you think more about authenticity, the finer things in life. And I don't mean expensive things. I mean real, authentic things that bring you joy. The invention of the plated truss, right? My Tech truss or any of these wood framed trusses allowed builders and designers and architects to forget about necessary structure in a home, right? When you can span 40 feet with a single truss, now you don't have to think about the interior layout of the home or the relationship of the windows to the exterior or the relationship of the floor plan to the roof. That, I think, did somewhat of a disservice to the industry. You can build them bigger, faster, cheaper.
Just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Exactly.
Yeah, more.
And, the fact that you have to, in authentic construction, And not to say that using trusses is inauthentic, but traditional construction where you have ridge beams, right? Where you have to think about where you're landing structure and how you're framing that and how someone in the field might be framing that by hand. That, I think, even just recognizing that helps the design along to a more authentic design. There's a reason why colonials look the way they do. There's a reason why salt box houses look the way they do, or you name it. I live in a Victorian brick colonial, or not a brick colonial, a brick Victorian from the 1800s. There's a reason why it functions the way it does. And living there for 10 years now, I'm still educated on a daily basis. I'm like, well, damn, that's why they did that. That's because that's what they had on hand at the time. And that's how they would have built it at that time. Yeah. So I think that was a really astute point that you made, that invention, whether or not, it was a good invention. It made it cheaper to build the homes. And as you said, post-war, made that more accessible to more people. But that shortcut, I think, started to take root.
100%. There's a study, if you listen to 99% Invisible Design podcast, there's a thesis out there that they're blaming all McMansions on the gusseted plate once that came around. And I think what's happened, to build on what Matt's saying, is I think when we got away from building with individual members and all these things, people got divorced from thinking from a human scale. And we started being able to do things at larger scale. And not at this point, this is another never ever, and it's not really a never ever, but this is the context of it. Is I have no idea why we keep going bigger and bigger and getting away from human scale. The thing that drives me insane is we see these tours and it's steeper and taller, and the scale is so inhuman, and there's no little detail left. And I'm wondering why. And I don't know if it's an American thing to drive towards bigger, and like it's a
manifest destiny. Go west, bigger, better.
It's and this is once again speaking only from an exterior standpoint, but it's strange to me because it's going away from being human. And I would say I think that getting away from the craft, which we've seen, there's less craft that we're seeing, which is unfortunate. That extra, that bigger, and I'm just going to touch on it quickly and I'll get off of it, but the amount of gables, the amount of articulation is an enormous problem.
If you're looking to level up your business in 2026 and beyond, the Contractor Coalition Summit is the place for you. If you've been a listener to the show, you know that this has been the single biggest factor in how I've leveled up over the last couple of years. It's had a huge, profound impact on my business, my personal life. It's what helped me launch the Curious Builder, in fact. Our second event of the year is a little change. September 15th in Minneapolis, we are doing a one-day event. So for the last 4 years, we've always done 3-day events, sometimes 4-day events. And we wanted to recognize that it's a significant investment in yourself, which is definitely worth every penny. I've talked many, many times about that. But for some people, it's just out of reach. So we wanted to do a 1-day crash course event. Obviously, we can't cover all that we can cover in a 4-day event, but this will be a major, major upgrade to whatever you are doing if you haven't been to one. So that'll be September 15th in Minneapolis. And then our last one of the season will be another 3-4-day event in Charlotte, North Carolina. All the details can be found at contractorcoalitionsummit.com. From a builder standpoint, because I love architecture, but I do hear like the siders and the roofers, and like I don't believe a sider and roofer should be in charge of architectural design. But the one thing that they do know, they know how water runs, they know where ice goes, and at your own detriment, a builder who doesn't listen to their siding and roofing partner is asking for problems. I mean, you talk about never evers. We have to do continuing education just like you do, and we see like roof rakes or kick-out flashing that's gone wrong, or you'll have a roof die into the side of a window. Like, what do you think that window's going to look like in 5 years, 10 years? Heck, it might not even make it a year. And so some of the basic principles, the systems and the claddings and climate, just because you can do certain things, let's say in Arizona, does not make, you should not do that in Minnesota where it's minus 30. Right. I had an architect, very talented, and not that we couldn't have solved it. I think we could have, but I would like to now, in my mind, build 100-year homes. I'm not sure I'm ready to put that into print, but I think I am. and I'm sure my lawyer would hate me for saying this, but I think the intention is more important than the actual doing of it. And what I mean by that is like, if I intend to build 100, first of all, I'll be dead. I have no idea if it'll be last, but that's not my point. My point is if I try with everything that I know today, that's all anyone can ask of anybody. But we have the technology. I mean, I live in a 1919 house that's over 100 years old. The technology exists if we're smart enough to get out of our own way and actually think intentionally about it. And so anyway, going back to the story is like we had a flat roof house, and you guys actually toured it. It was the metal house, Medicine, like super cool house. But originally there were skylights, big skylights, like 3 foot by 3 foot skylights in every shower on the second level that opened to a flat roof. And I'm like, I kind of have a never ever. Not that you couldn't ever solve it, because I know there's great technology companies out there, but like, man, you are cutting a hole in the roof and it's minus 30 and in the most moist room in the house. And so I basically told the client, I said, I'm always there for team collaborative. And I told the client, the architect ahead of time, I said, I'm super uncomfortable with this detail. And I think it's important for us to be honest. I didn't throw him under the bus because I said it in front of him very genteelly in front of the client. And I just said, this is my concern. I have to warranty your home for decades. And this is something that I think has a higher risk of failing. And the client was like, I didn't really like it anyway. I'm like, well, thanks for speaking up now. But anyway, I guess my point is we do need to listen to our people because anyway, not that you.
100%. Yeah. And I want to go down that road a little farther with that is we're seeing this over articulation. I think that's misguided design intent of what the market wants or should want, in my opinion. Let me give a couple examples. Like you had already identified, we're seeing gables smashed together against dormers with a 1 foot water run out, which is not a lasting solution. We're seeing very dangerous, what we would consider dangerous. We're interested in lasting architecture. If you know plenty about PLAAD, we're interested in creating things that are lasting, not only built to last, but aesthetically to last. So if we don't do the aesthetic part, if we don't do the composition right, people aren't going to want to be in that house for 200 years. Here's a good example of how to study that and how we frame that up. If you go and take a street view image of every house down Summit Avenue, none of them, or rare occasion, are they articulated as much as what we're seeing in the luxury market in certain circumstances. And they still hit yard all day long on what's being done.
I love that they hit yard. It's awesome.
Now, why is that? If you study it, it's because the composition of those exteriors and use of material far exceeds what we're doing. I think the misguided understanding from a design perspective is more articulation means opulence and luxury, and that's good, versus really good composition, being quiet and restrained, having the time it takes to design something that doesn't have 6 different articulations on the front facade and is still beautiful 150 years after it was created, still hitting yard on something that we've had a bunch of time to improve, which we still haven't. So there's your study. And if somebody, I'd be happy to argue that with someone. Now, that doesn't mean articulation is terrible, but just used in moderation. It's like anything. If you take our overly articulated facades as a design trend, and when we have problems with hitting the trend gun too hard on something, that's one that I think is pretty rampant, because it looks like we're putting gables on everything, like a giant mansion, and putting it in a giant smusher, and you have all these gables on gables. So anyways, that's something that is difficult. Now, the one thing I would say to that, as a caveat, there are architectural styles, if you're rooted in them, they do warrant having gables next to gables. Like, let's say you have a certain type of Tudor that has a gutter down the middle. That is warranted, right? But it better have a good reason. Yeah. So anyway, that was a long kite. But I think it's important to say.
I think we have to slow down. As we mentioned, Misa, who's here, a lot of the things that ended up being in this home was for my personality. I created a lot of things to calm me down. And the reason I'm bringing it up is I think what happens is, as a business owner, because this podcast, we're often just talking about entrepreneurship and how hard it is. Right now, we're talking very specific about design, but I think they actually come hand in hand. Sometimes we have to actually do less to do better work. And I think I could build maybe 2, maybe 3 Misa Houses at one time. Maybe. I'd have to get a bigger team. And I mentioned to you guys when you first came in, but the amount of attention and effort and collaboration to execute something like this for 2 years takes a colossal amount of effort, energy, and leadership and clarity of vision. And one thing that you do, and what I try to do with our clients too, is like the client is the story. And that's what really gives shape to the blank page for you as the talented designers and architects and the interior designers as well. And then my job obviously is to build it and execute it. But on top of it, we all need to make money. And I think the reason this kind of goes full circle is I think, when we go really fast at our own detriment, there's this great quote that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. But it does take more time to go as a group. It does take more thoughtfulness. I think the value, at least my value statement is, and I think this is why it's important for a builder, like you might listen to this podcast and this might not be for you. That's okay. There's all kinds of structures that need to exist. There's a huge continuum of homes, right? And, I give a lot of credit to my dad. He often reminds me, as much as he is proud of his son and he's proud of the work that I do, he often will tell me, don't lose sight of the fact that, I keep saying their name, Tim and Mary Goltz, shout out to them if they ever listen to the Curious Builder. I built them a home in like 2007, a little tiny yellow house, one gable, because it was a super simple house with a little portico on the front. I have a family picture of them. And I bet they're just as happy in their house as someone would be in this multi-million-dollar home. And like, I want to make sure that as a human, as much as I love my craft and I love my craft and I want to do really high-end work, that I don't lose sight that it's still somebody's home. I mean, I know, Matt, you camp, right? I camp too. I don't know if Mark does, but like, you sent me the picture of the water bottle on the canoe, or you're in somewhere, wherever it was. But like, a tent, I'm always reminded of how simple life can get. Our clients want, large homes, and that's fine. But like a constraint, even a size, and we're all dealing with first world problems here. But when you go sleep in a tent on the ground, you're like, oh, wow, a 3 foot by 5 foot space is actually pretty luxurious when it's raining out, and so I think perspective is really important, I guess is all I'd offer there.
100%. Yeah, I also would like to talk about it in a value and cost perspective. And I use the analogy of food all the time, and food and architecture and design have a lot in common. How you make meals and how you do really great. There's a lot of great ingredients, and it's all about composition, right? But it doesn't have to be the most. Except for
You don't like cilantro? Oh, I love cilantro.
But you know what? Matt loves shellfish. Oh, he loves shellfish so much.
I eat nothing that has to hold its breath.
You eat nothing that has to hold its breath. That's a very interesting. I feel like I want to make you a shirt with that. That's
surface of the water and below is off.
You don't like fish?
Plus cilantro.
Huh? Plus cilantro.
Everything else.
Wow, this is. I kind of want to dive down this road. This sounds pretty. This is never ever. How many things are never underneath the ocean for this guy?
Yeah, he's got never evers for food. How about that?
Yeah. It looks like pneumonia. Don't eat it.
Oh my gosh, that is.
Oh, that's amazing.
I can't own that one. Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
That is so funny. Yeah, but when it comes to like composing a really great meal, it doesn't have to be the most expensive ingredients, right? It's just done with care and time. We look at architecture the same way. So think of like a really great Italian pasta. It's made with humble ingredients, but it can be done really well. So I think that's another misconception is people think of it like architecture is a luxury. It's only for expensive homes. That is not true. Crafting a space just because it's done with less expensive materials. When we talk about architectural durability from a design perspective is we take what we like to take a more careful approach and more of a little bit more of an academic approach of site phenomena when we study things. And this is getting back to that Rubik's Cube I mentioned earlier. And that is, you see this in other architecture that isn't what you'll hear is like not foresighted architecture. That's a really quick way of saying something that's way deeper. But it comes down to studying the sun, studying the site, studying where its place is on the globe, where rooms are arranged, how you walk outside, what you're going to be doing at that time of day. And I think those are all sides of the Rubik's Cube, right? And I think what happens is with quick design, they take the Rubik's Cube, get yellow finished, throw it on the table. Client comes by, sees the yellow and goes, oh, I like the yellow. But it takes 6 months to a year to pick up the other sides of that cube and realize, oh, you know what? Red's pretty busted. And so is blue. And it takes time to figure that out. It also takes time to get that right. So it doesn't mean it takes a lot of money from a resource perspective and material to do that. But we think it's really important to get those things right. And that doesn't mean it's opulent. That doesn't mean it's fancy. That doesn't mean it's a luxury. It's something that should be done for any amount of resources you put to.
That might be one of my favorite analogies I've heard in a long time. That one, I'm going to be using that one for a long time because it's so visceral and so visual. The way you've said, and you're right. I mean, think of like the trend of shiplap, which, we do have some, and shiplap's been around for a long time. I mean, you go to the East Coast, it's been around forever, and there's a reason for it. But man, the early 2000s, it's like, oh my word, we shiplapped as builders. Oh my word, you couldn't have a wall without shiplap. And I was like, the cat's meow. That's all you did was shiplap, right? But it was a trend. You called it the trend gun. We got a little excited. We turned that thing into a Gatling gun of shiplap, and we just went to town. And it's time and place, but it is funny. So let me ask you this: how do you handle trends? And like, what's the difference between a trend and like something that's classic? Because a lot of our higher end clients, they'll come to us now. And, my job is an interviewer, really, not only on this podcast, but my clients, right? So they'll come to me and say, this is our budget. This is what we want to do. And I'm really looking at their body language because we have a lot of talent in this town. And so it's really like, okay, who's the right fit personality wise, skill wise, all these different things to fit this narrative together, because we're still trying to figure out their value statement. And they aren't trained the way you are, or even I am. A lot of them, but a lot of them are coming from a place of, in some ways, we don't know any better. It's whether it's cultural. You said that earlier. Like, is it a cultural thing for the U.S. just want bigger, better, faster? I think there's a big truth to that. But I think the more sophisticated buyer has had the benefit of traveling, and not just to Europe, but just in general. And I think they come back and they stayed at a really cool old home or Airbnb, or they're a little hostel or a little whatever it is. And they realize like, oh, I just like how well thought out that was. And kind of there's a book called Purple Cow. Like, if all the cows are black and white and yours is purple, yours is different. In some ways, being classic and timeless is like the new purple cow, because everyone's been doing the gable on gable everything. And now all of a sudden you do people think you reinvented the wheel. And you're like, no, I just went back really a long time ago and went to something really classic.
Do you want to take that? No, I've got a couple examples.
Yeah, go.
Wow, this one's interesting. It can go a couple of different directions, but one is an example I'll use, and this is also where there's you can't speak in absolutes, and this is where this is important. We never root ourselves in trend ever, but that doesn't mean you don't sometimes accept parts of trend and use them in a composition, but it should never be the trend gun. The difference between great composition is the antithesis of that is trend gun. And that's why AI doesn't scare us that much, because composition is composition. Trend gun is AI, is just throwing something and throwing the trends at it and just cover it in it. And we see that happen, which is really too bad. That doesn't mean you can't use shiplap, but you shouldn't put it everywhere. And it better be rooted in authenticity within its composition. And that could go down a whole other.
I love it. This is great.
I got a whole other chapter.
Keep going.
Yeah,
but this is a good example, and why you have to have a caveat. White farmhouse is dead forever. You go Instagram forever. Oh, well, is it? Is it dead if it's on a farmstead? Is it dead if there's a barn in the background? Is it dead if it's literally in an agrarian field? It's not. That means it's authentic. It's just dead if it's not in an authentic place. And that's the funny part, is we speak in absolutes and it doesn't make sense. That's why it goes really helpful to go back into your brain and into your heart and go, is it authentic? Am I driving a Ferrari or am I driving a Fiero with fiberglass? Is it authentic? If white farmhouse is totally all right if it's in that setting. However, if the trend gun and the whole street gets shot up with boom, boom, white farmhouse, it might be a problem, right? So that's one way to think about it. On an interior standpoint, though, that's where the trend gun gets hit worse. And composition is so important. It's all composition. Once again, steak tastes great. Ice cream on steak tastes like crap. And it always has to come back to that. That's why you never put a bullet in a material or put, or a way of thinking or doing things. And secondarily, this is the next chapter I wanted to go down, and I hope this is okay. Matt, please bolster on this. we're seeing people doing seemingly traditional architecture or in the scope of what we're doing. And there's a ton of people who are doing a great job, by the way. I don't know if it's okay to plug our competitors.
Yeah, of course.
Murphy and those guys are crushing it. Like, you want to talk about great, truly traditional detailing. Like TEA, Dan Knapp, those guys over there are, once again, hitting yard. That kind of stuff. If you're doing traditional work and it's rooted in an understanding of historically it started here, even if you're altering it some and it's inspired, but it has roots and you can explain that and you have a why, that's wonderful. But on the other end, we're seeing these semi-traditional houses that you walk up to and it looks a little bit like a grab bag or a KFC bowl of like, I grabbed a little bit of this.
He's been to a grad party in the last couple of weeks, by the sounds of it.
I get a little bit of like, this might be Tudor, but I don't know. And this one is like I don't know what this is. And you're walking up to it, and once again, it's okay to reinvent stuff. It's okay to be have an adaptation of something that has been done before. But if we're kind of inventing stuff out of the blue and then still calling it transitional or traditional, I think it's really helpful to have a foot in some sort of grounding of why you would do a style or a take. Now, once again, there's a bunch of our competitors and colleagues that are doing an excellent job of that, by the way, really well. But there's people who are not doing as good of a job in that arena. And like, for instance, here's a good never ever. The standard soffit return we see on everything. That's like the Crocs of residential architecture. But now here's the caveat. Will we use that? Yes, if we're doing like a federal or a Georgian and colonial and the frieze has to return and die correctly. Yes, that's going to get used. But of course, it's the easiest thing to do. And what I think is hilarious is you'll drive by what is quote unquote a Tudor home with what would be a colonial or federal return, but then dumbed way back down to have like an aluminum soffit on it. But they're like, but that's a Tudor. And you're like, oh my gosh, like it's the quickest one off to see and be like, oh, and that doesn't have to be luxury or opulence. That's just being open to understand how to change the end of your fascia. Like that's it. That's important. And that's what I'm talking about.
I agree, but this goes back a little bit. In some sense, it's to our own detriment if we don't listen to our trade partners. But that particular detail might be we listen to our trade partner too much because it's easy. So a lot of times things get done incorrectly because it's the easy thing. Or how many times have I heard in my career, well, that's just how we do it. And I'm just a naturally, before the Curious Builder existed, I was the Curious Builder and I still am. And I'm just a curious person. But why? And I mean, this won't surprise you. In high school, I was voted the most talkative person in school, but it was because I know what, but I used to sit in the front row, even though I was a W for Williams, you'd think I'd be in the back, but I would raise my hand all the time. I always wanted to know why. And drives my wife actually bananas because she just wants me to do whatever she tells me to do. Sorry, honey. But I need to know why. Like if you can explain to me the reason behind what you want, then I feel like I don't, it's a little bit like you give someone a fish or teach them how to fish. And I hate fishing, so it's a bad analogy. But like the point is I like catching. I don't like fishing. But help me understand what is the intent. Because I feel like if you tell me that, now you don't have to keep repeating it to me because now I'm like, oh, okay. Well, where else can I apply that? And that just helps me evolve as a person.
Yeah, man. It was great.
He's so polite. May I?
No,
May I?
Not at all. I think it's Simon Sinek, is it not? Start with why.
Yeah.
Great book. Read that. And that's so applicable in design, out of design, in any industry. Start with why. Why are we doing this? If it's a marketing campaign, why are we doing this? If we're designing something, why? Answering that question will get you 90% of the way there. And so I think that's often missed and why we see lazy composition, lazy design, or, what we've been railing against for the last 45 minutes is that question wasn't asked. And I think there's a different answer for every client. And that's part of our responsibilities as architects and designers is to mine the why, right? And sometimes it's tough to uncover. It takes a while with certain clients to open up. And now we understand, that's the impetus for that decision or that desire in the home. when I hate to always go back to my home, but it continues to unpack for me design choices that were made. When we first moved in 12 years ago, I said, I'm ripping these drapes off, and I'm going to rip out all the gold wallpaper, right? It's got true age appropriate Victorian wallpaper, and it's metallic gold. Hated it. You know what? 10 years later, I don't want to rip it out, because I had a dinner one time about 5 years ago with candlelight, and I'm like, I looked around and I said, hot damn, that's why, right? That's the why, because it reflects the light. When the house was built, it was done with candlelight. I'm looking out here at the color of the light. Now I know it's all artificial, but we developed around fire as a species and as a culture, and we're drawn to that, right? And that it hits something deep that I don't know if we can ever put a finger on it, but you're drawn to fire, you're drawn to that color spectrum. And when we have, I'm looking around and seeing all the finishes on the fixtures, it reflects that light. It picks up the sparkle at night. And that's really important to pick up on. And so when I looked around at my dinner party, I said, my God, look at it. We have no lights on, we have candle, but there's a glow on the walls. And that's incredible. Let's get back to that.
When it comes to quality, craftsmanship, and performance, Pella sets the standard. Whether you're building custom homes or designing a timeless space, Pella offers innovative window and door solutions that blend beauty and efficiency. With showrooms and experts around the country, Pella makes it easy to find the perfect fit for your next project and their team to support it. Build with confidence, build with Pella. Visit Pella.com to explore products and connect with your local rep today. For more information, you can listen to episode 1 or listen to episode 109, where we bring on Pella owners and founders at Pella Northland, as well as their innovative team behind the Steady Set innovation. Every builder and probably designer can relate to this, is like inevitably you design a home. It gets more expensive than the client wants. You then do our least favorite word, value engineering. So we constrict whatever it is and go through this process, which is very normal. And then usually clients do one of two things. They either add back right away because they know they're going to add it anyway and that's what they want, or you fight it the whole time and they add it back anyway. But now it's really a detriment to the project because you're adding it in mid-flow versus like from the get-go. And anyway, but sometimes people have to discover it on their own. And as I can only do so much, you're in charge of your own dinner, what to order. But if you have, the steak with ice cream, you might decide, I want them separated. No problem. We'll make you another steak. But I had this right now. I have a client who they spend all their time eating outside, but we constricted the outside space due to costs. And we're through framing and the space is now up so they can visually see it. We walked out there. And they're like, we spend all our time outside. We can't do this. And it wasn't boo-boo, that's not my role, right? My role is no problem. How can we help you get what you want? And they're like, let's add this flat roof with the screens and I think it was like $55,000 ad. And before they were so budget, $1,000 over, but when it was something that they valued and they wanted and it fit their life, they said, we spend all our time here. And I'm somebody who personally this is my value statement. If you use it, it's worth it. It's a very simple value statement. If you drive that Ferrari versus the Fiero and you want to spend $300,000-400,000 on that Ferrari Testarossa, but you drive it in the dirt and you drive it 220 days a year in Minnesota, personally, on my value statement, I think it's worth that kind of money because you use it. But the person who buys it and leaves it in the garage and just looks at it and never does anything, for me, maybe they have a different value statement than me. But I'm like, oh man, I just feel like you're missing something here. And I often share that example with people before we get into design to let them know, help me understand what you value. And we can make these moments that you invest your money in to be something that you're really happy with. Because I've never had a client at the end come back and say, I wish I wouldn't have spent money on that thing I love. Mm-hmm. But they always will say, I wish I would have spent money on the thing I didn't do that I loved.
Yeah. Mark, can you talk about Eling's facade?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
This is a project of ours out in Coeur d'Alene.
But can I speak to one thing first? And Matt, you said this earlier, and just because I'm only going to focus on this little soffit return thing, because if we go into different directions, get bigger. But Mark, you also said this is asking the why. It's interesting, and you said reaching back to find answers, right, in time. Like, I'm going to simplify. I'm not going to do what's current. It's regionally, we have, if you go back 100 years, we have probably, 6 times the amount of even rake overhang options as we do today. And there were all regional and reasons for them.
Mm-hmm.
And it came down to, you had mentioned this before, our partners who are executing, because they were executed because of a certain way in a region and for that style. And there's a purpose behind why they looked that way. And it had to do with its function or how the material operated. And then we kind of got, once again, along with the truss gusset and all that and manufacture, we got away from that and it became all kind of uniform. Where I think on trying to understand and going back and understanding why a rake overhang looked like that and what it did functionally, right? That's really important. So I was just going to mention, just as, because we're only focusing on that one thing, I think that makes things authentic. But Elings, yeah, we have a client in Coeur d'Alene that hopefully we're going to get to photograph this house soon, and it's probably our most aggressively modern or capital A architecture project that we've done, and probably the most thoughtful. And our client came to us and said, and I hope I'm speaking to the right things that you want me to, but that she wanted an ephemeral house, and that she was really obsessed with the water and the sky. And she had this amazing quote. She's like, without the sky, you don't have the beautiful aspect of the water because of the reflection. And she came back to us and said, I want a house where there's no wood and it's 100% glass, and I just experience the water. And I'm like, and she's like, I also love steel and concrete. And
she said, I'm an above ground steel and concrete type of gal.
Steel and concrete woman.
83 years old.
And
that's amazing.
Like, oh my gosh, how do we do this? And then first off, we're in a development in Coeur d'Alene on the lake that is one of the most stringent traditional situations.
Mountain, like rustic mountain houses.
Yeah. And she's originally natively from China, and she wanted her house to be traditional. From a traditional sense, she wanted to be a Chinese courtyard house, but in a modern interpretation, which has no hallways. And then also had to respond to Chinese traditional aspects of all sorts of things of how spirits move in. One, you can't have doorways aligned and spirits move. And
I can't wait to see this thing. That sounds amazing.
What we ended up having to do, and this is how we solved all of it, because she didn't want any articulation. She wanted a solid steel and glass box. So to get past architectural review board, we took a photograph of the water with the reflection of the sky in it.
And by the way, the reason I asked is because I'm looking at the interference pattern of the two waves in the pool out there.
Yeah, and we looked at the basically waves in the sky. We took these images similar to the de Young Herzog de Meuron had done, and we translated it into an image done by pixelation across a giant steel panel wall. So the whole project is either glass or this large wall that is at close range looks like individual holes. And at 200 yards at night, when it is illuminated, has the appearance of water and the sky in it. But the other part is we had to have this open for egress purposes. So the entire facade opens like bifold doors as well. And not to mention it doesn't have any hallways. So we had to find a way to do that through the courtyard. But the intent of this is we put a lot of effort in that facade.
With snow.
And we put that in front of the design review board, and they were compelled enough to be like, wow, you've thought way more about architecture in a sense that we'll pass it. We'll let you go. Because if this is this much representative of where its place is on the globe, you've put plenty of time and effort into it, and we think that we'd like to have it here this way.
Well, yeah, and their design review guidelines, or the design guidelines. It needs to be representative of the region. It needs to be authentic and mountains out there. That means, all right, big 2x siding with big rusticated stone and cedar shake roof and Yellowstone lodge type. And he said, actually, this is more site specific than anything else in the development, and here's why. And there was that story of saying we took the client's image of Lake Coeur d'Alene that you can see from the home and made this glowing lantern that changes during the day. And I think maybe the more compelling thing for me is, Yes, it glows at night like a lantern. It's gorgeous, very subtle. But during the day, it records the shadows of the sun coming through. So it's never the same on the floor because the sun's constantly moving, both in the zenith but also across the sky. So it's always a dappled shadow effect on the ground, changes constantly. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a living house, and I think that's more important to me than the fact that it glows at night. That it creates that sense of time and recording of time. I think we called it the recording.
It is, yeah. It's basically the recording of time and place. So what does it mean to be authentic, right? This is not a shot at the other home in the development, but there's truly a water wheel on the front of a house, like it's a functioning water wheel. And I was like,
I had flashbacks.
All right, well, that's one take.
One way to look at it,
and not ours. Our take is,
what is it? Turning dirt or a gold mine? There's probably no water up on this thing.
It's like some water flowing thing. But the point is our interpretation of authentic is this: if we have a courtyard that represents our client, that brings her back to her childhood, and that makes her happy, that's important, and that's authentic. If we have a completely different modeled archetype of a home that doesn't look like anything from China, but the spaces respond to the same as they did when she was in China, and it represents her, that's authentic. When we have a piece of architecture that sits somewhere on the globe that records time and place, and that's meaningful to our client, that's authentic. If it is made of materials that came from this earth and are the earth tones and blend into the landscape, well, that's authentic. So if we just slapped something down from an aesthetic standpoint just because this object looked, however, I don't know. I think it could be an argument made both ways, but I think it's way more telling to have a piece of architecture that tells a story about where it sits on the globe and how it interacts with water and how you move through your day and how it gives you memories of how you grew up and represents you as a person and is doing all the meaningful things that make life worth living, then that's authentic. And so it doesn't always have to be seen in a traditional lens. It can be seen in a lot of different ones. And once again, it all comes back to composition and studying, why we're doing this at all.
Well, and we learned too, listening to clients, we had this vision for the courtyard. Of course, it's our vision, right? And it's how we wanted to finish the interior of the courtyard. We pushed and pushed and pushed, and she kept on saying, no. We wanted to landscape the interior of the courtyard to bring the landscape into the home because the courtyard is surrounded on three sides by glass. So it is a room. And that's something that we learned as architects. It was fantastic. She taught us. We said, she didn't want hallways. And I said, well, how are you going to get to your room? And she said, I'm going through my other room, the courtyard. And I said, well, but that's outside. She said, it doesn't matter. It's still a room. I can go through it to get to the bedroom. It was her daughter that talked her out of it. So we do get, 3-4 feet of snow. And that's not the best idea. But it was the idea that the courtyard is considered, in her mind, no different than any other room in the house. Just doesn't have a roof over it. But we kept on pushing. So we really want to bring that landscape into the courtyard so you can experience it holistically from the inside of the home. And she said, no, it's not concrete, it's tile. Very similar to what we're looking at out here. But it's bare, completely bare. We kept pushing her, and on one of the trips, she got teary-eyed and said, no, this is the reason why I don't want anything in there. And she was relating a story to her childhood home. And we said, well, there's the why. It's not ours. We're trying to impose a design concept that we thought would be really successful. But listening to her why, I think, and that ended the conversation. We said, you know what, Eileen? That's good enough for us. That's the why. Yeah. Let's respect that. No more questions. And I think that push and pull with the client was really, really valuable.
I think that's why it's important. I've often told my clients when we interview, don't surround yourself with yes men and women. Surround yourself with people that will ask why, that will dig deeper. And we had a client. I'm not a private person, as you likely know, and otherwise I wouldn't have a podcast either. And so, but she was very private, maybe one of the most private clients I've ever had. And I never understood the true why, and it wasn't my place. But long story short, they have a blind on every room in the house, even the front door. And I really had a hard time with that. And I think the designer and the architect got it a lot quicker than I was younger in my career, probably not as good a listener. I'm only marginally better now. And the point was I just couldn't understand. But it was her home. It's what she wanted. But we had such a good relationship that she didn't get offended that I kept trying to push and do different things. I'm like, well, what if we didn't do blinds? What if we did curtains? Or what if we did frosted glass? Or all these things I didn't want to do because I'm just like, why? And I never really understood the true, I suspect there's something that happened, obviously, a long time ago that wasn't my business to know, or she wasn't open enough to share about it. But now I look at it differently. It taught me a very valuable lesson as a younger builder that, I kind of push back 3 times is kind of my rule. And on the third time, like I've said my piece enough times. It's your home. I will do it for you. I joke, I haven't had anyone do this, but like, if you want a purple house with white polka dots, like I'll build it for you. Like it's your home. I will do it for you. Can I please find a cool way to do it so it looks great? But like, no one has taken me up on that particular offer, but I don't want to lose, thankfully, but I don't want to lose sight that like it's still their home. But I think I often tell them, and I'll use this story, but like that, I want you to know how much I care about your home. And I think it's important that we do care and we inform you. At the end of the day, the choice is still yours. And I had that's cringy. I had this beautiful home. He loved Frank Lloyd Wright. In his kitchen, he had he didn't want to spend the money for a high-end fridge freezer where it'd be flush with all the cabinetry. It was beautiful green matte white oak everywhere, and he loved wood. But he had read it before. He was an engineer, which is my kryptonite, and he wanted a 2-inch air reveal around the fridge. And he read this GE stainless steel, looks like it belongs in a dorm room, fridge was the best one on the market. He said I could go 20 years without replacing this fridge. And I was just like dying inside because they had cut everywhere, but this kitchen was beautiful and I wanted to take a photo of it. And so that was my ego. And I said, Mike was his name. And I said, Mike, can I please tell you? And we fought and he'd get pretty upset about it. And I just couldn't get it. I'm like, it was always about money. I said, I've never done this for a client before. I can't believe I'm doing this. I will pay for the upgrade to go to Wolf Sub-Zero on it. It won't cost you a dime more. And his response was, no, because you'll screw me some other way. And I said, Mike, if that's how you really feel about me, why are you even building with me? Because like, everyone has an opportunity, if that's really what you think, to damage the other person, financially. If that's really, the trust is the most important thing. And I said, it took 2 bullheaded men, me and him, going at it on this thing. And the designers had made peace with this long before I had. Same with the architect. I could not get rid of this fridge. I'm like, what are we doing, people? This thing is so ugly. And he taught me a valuable lesson that 3 times, no more. I mean, this is what he wanted. It was his home. And I just had to accept it. And I'm not terribly upset with how I went through that because I think he knows I cared about it. But I finally got to it where I said, do you want my opinion or you just want me to do what you want me to do? And he goes, I don't want your opinion. I just want you to do what I say. And I was like, and from that point on, he never asked me for my opinion for the rest of the build. And he's still he loves his home. He's very happy. But he made it very clear that he was not interested in my opinion. It was a humbling lesson for me. I'm proud of the home, and it's a beautiful home. And they're great clients. They came to Misa. They're actually one of only 2 clients that came to Misa Hus early. And so, like, the relationship is sound. But it was a humbling and just a sort of a career lesson that I needed to learn. Anyway.
Well, Mike,
I got a fun one.
Yeah.
I'm just going to toot your horn a bit here. We were just talking, we had a check-in with one of our team members yesterday at lunch. We like to do that every so often. And I said, one thing that you can learn from Mark, and Mark's very good at it, is, yes, it is the client's home and they get to ultimately make the decision. It's our job as architects and designers to educate them on why solving yellow at the detriment of all the other colors could be a bad idea. But it's not just to say, I don't like the design, I think it looks bad. Come at it to say, all right, if we do that, here are the 6 downstream results that you're not seeing, that we see, just because this is our profession, that we see as potentially detrimental to that decision or as a consequence of that decision that you don't see. You educate them on that. Oftentimes they'll say, all right, I can, get on board with you. If they don't, you've done your best. Yep. And there's nothing more you can do. It's their home, and we have to respect that. But it's our job to say, but have you thought of green, blue?
I agree. That's reframing it and helping paint the picture, I think, is always good. Conflict management, honestly, in anything. You have one last thing, and then we'll close her down.
It's going to be great. And Matt, the minute I say it, I think you're going to love this. One of our first larger homes that we did out west was a house in Copper Mountain, Colorado.
He's already laughing.
Can we just say
they're friends of ours. And first off, we love this house. We love them. They're great. They're a peak client. And it is a true post and beam house on the mountain in Copper Mountain, on the run. And wonderful people, beautiful home.
We've had the luxury of staying there as a family, and my kid now thinks that that's how most people ski.
Yeah, that's been dangerous. But we're building this home, and we're getting very far along. And Matt and I have different roles in the office, as you know, and we're not going to get into that. But our client is friends with both of us, and we respond differently to different things. And during the whole frame, giant timber frame all the way up, and we get a call one day.
I got called on the way to Duluth.
On the way to Duluth.
I want to remove that column.
What is this column doing here?
Like, that column? Yeah, that column.
And I'm like, what do you mean?
Holding up 2/3 of your
And it's been in the drawings the whole time. Now, we had it designed, specifically had it designed so that it's right at the end of a couch, and it would be right at the end table location where you have like a drink or something that can be put on this column. We had an idea to design it all in, and it would be perfectly placed, I will say. But we pushed back with our client and friend, like similar 3 times. We gave them the whys, the Rubik's Cube. And at the end of the day, we had to remove the column and come up with a structural change on a giant timber. A very large timber frame.
Very big bucket flange.
Huge bucket flange. And it had a lot of ramifications that Matt went to bat and dealt with, that I just got to kind of do. I don't like this.
Mr. Cranky Pants over here.
But why it's been great is there's been a repeat client since then. And it's still a joke. We jokingly, we're going to make the column out of cardboard.
Oh, that's
set
funny.
It outside their house at Copper Mountain. They're looking for work, and it'd be the column. It's like he was out of work, and to this day, I saw him last week at a grad party, and I'm like, the column would have worked. And they just still laugh and make a big...
Now it's become... it's no different than a fight with your spouse or something. Then years later, you argue about whatever that was big at that time. It's like a funny thing. That's honestly what friendships are based on, and stories and all these failed things that happen or don't happen. That's the mark actually of a good relationship, I think.
Right. But that's true to your point. We can give the why. We can show the other sides of the Rubik's Cube that it can affect, one of them being cost and all these other things. But at the end of it, if we give all of our whys back out, the reasons why we did something, and the client says, still no, we have to respect them and say, we're crafting this house like we're crafting a suit or a dress for you. Yeah, I understood. It's your home. We got to back off, and now I got a big timber column on my house.
Well, I want to respect your time, and I know it's funny because I remember when I actually had asked you guys 2 years ago to come on the podcast, and then last year, and it's I always know that if I can get you to the table, we could do 3 more hours easy peasy with the two of you. So we're gonna have you guys come back. We're not gonna wait 3 years for the next one. No worries. This it's like a fine vintage. It just got better with time, Mark. Thanks for tuning in the Curious Builder podcast, live from Mesa Hoos, over and out. Thanks for tuning in to the Curious Builder podcast. If you like this episode, do us a favor, share it with 3 other business owners. The best way that we can spread what we're doing is by word of mouth, and with your help, we can continue to help other curious builders expand their business. Please share it with your friends, like and review online, and thanks again for tuning in.